Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to Scottish Summit Virtual 2021. I hope you've had a fantastic summit so far. Just to let you know, this session is a recording, but I am online with you right now while you are watching this session, available to answer any of your questions throughout this session. We are here to talk about Azure Data Studio above and beyond, and we're in the Methven room this afternoon. A big thank you to all of our sponsors for being part of the community and making this opportunity what it is for me and all of the other speakers to be able to present on all of these sessions throughout this summit for you to continue your professional development in 2021. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Warwick. I'm the Principal Consultant and Founder with SQL Masters Consulting, based in Brisbane, Australia. I'm a Data Platform MVP, Microsoft Certified Master. If you want to ask me any questions, not just about this session, feel free to reach out to me via my Twitter handle, which you can see on the slide. So what are we here to talk about this afternoon? Well, I'm going to introduce you to Azure Data Studio. Where did it come from? Why have we got it? How are you able to use it? And as you can see, the majority of this session is a demo session where I'll take you through introducing you to the tool, introducing you to some of its existing features, some of the new features, and hopefully giving you a good experience as to why you should be using Azure Data Studio, how you can be using Azure Data Studio, and being more productive using Azure Data Studio to manage your data estates. When I first started using SQL Server, it was only supported on a Windows environment. Like all things technology, it changes. And so with the release of SQL Server 2017, we got support for SQL Server on Linux and on Mac OS. Now, unfortunately, Management Studio only runs on a Windows platform. So we needed something to be able to manage and maintain our environments running on these new operating systems that we're now supported on. So what did we get? We got Azure Data Studio. And that's why I'm here to talk to you and introduce to you Azure Data Studio and hopefully take you on a journey as to what it can do for you, how you can be very productive looking after your data estates. Now, I did mention that this all changed with the release of SQL Server 2017. And so as you can see here, we got our initial release of Azure Data Studio on November 15, 2017. On September 24, 2018, we got the GA release. So there was plenty of time where it was available to people to test and use and provide feedback. To assist with that testing and use feedback, there was a monthly release cycle, and that monthly release cycle is still happening. And that normally happens around the 10th or the 12th of each month, depending on where the date fits on the weekday. Now, if you are wanting to be part of this and provide feedback and assist with the direction or some of the features that may be incorporated and functionality that is supported, then you're able to do that. Go to the Azure Data Studio GitHub, and you're able to raise feature requests, raise bug fixes, talk to the product team to get that influence and show your support on what you use in the real world. If you want to take that even further, there's the Insiders Edition where you can gain access to some of these features, etc., before they're made generally available. I will warn you though, it is an insider, so there is possibility that it's not 100% ready. So if you're going to use it in a production environment, just be mindful it's not a production ready release because it's only the Insiders Edition, but you're getting early access. Now, as I mentioned, when I first started using SQL Server, it was on a Windows environment and it was predominantly just in a on-premises environment. Over time, like we mentioned, things changed. We got cloud computing. And so we're able to manage and maintain our data estates in the cloud with Azure Data Studio And we can manage things like our Azure SQL database, our managed instance when it first came about, our Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Now, just because the application is called Azure Data Studio, don't be drawn in to think that it only works in an Azure environment. It's just a name. It works for anything that is SQL Server related, or, as we'll see on the next slide, more than just SQL Server, because we need to use, or we might need to use in our environments, PostgreSQL. You might be wanting to use Custo, might be using Azure Arc to assist with managing and maintaining your environments and being able to spin things up a whole lot quicker. So it's more than just SQL Server. And taking that to the next level again, it's actually a data platform, because we need to encompass things outside of SQL Server like Docker, where we can have SQL Server in containers. We've now got access to Synapse or machine learning. So it's an entire data platform based on what you're wanting to do, what your role is when you're working with that data. Now, how does Azure Data Studio provide this flexibility? Well, the introduction of extensions. And it's all of these different little feature sets that you can install and utilize by picking and choosing the extensions which you require based on the type of role that you're doing. Now, I'm not going to go through this list. This is just a list of some of the recommended extensions that I think that maybe you should look at and install, especially if you're a DBA looking after your data estate. Now, because this is a recorded session, you can come back and see this at any point in time. I'm not going to go through. We will have a look at some of those in the upcoming demo. With that, I did mention that we're not going to spend a lot of time in the slide deck. It's now time for us to go across to the demo. Now, the first thing we want to do is install Azure Data Studio. To do that is very simple. We go to our favorite search engine and we type in install Azure Data Studio. It'll bring us to the official page where, if we scroll down just a little bit, we can see here's the 3 different platforms that we're able to pick and choose from, pick the right installer, and away we go. Once we have installed Azure Data Studio, what we're met with is the application or the welcome screen. Now, since I first started using this, has changed and evolved, giving us a fantastic and much better user experience. On the welcome screen, it outlines things that we're able to do very quickly and easily to get up and running. Things like create a connection, run a query, create a notebook, or deploy a server. If we scroll down, we've got other useful tips and tricks for us, with links out to documentation, out to some of the small videos that are available for us to learn what we can and can't do. There's also an introduction to extensions as to what we need, like we mentioned on the slide deck, to be very flexible. So, talking of that flexibility, one of the things that a lot of people in the community asked for when we just had Management Studio was the ability to change the color or have a dark theme to make it easier. Well, out of the box, Azure Data Studio does that very simply. We come down to the cog and we've got color theme. Out of the box, we've got a number of options available to us, and if I was to choose the Azure Dark theme, there we go. It's gone and changed it across the entire application very simply, very easily. Now, we're not going to stay in this. It was just to show you how easy that flexibility is for us to change that to whatever we're wanting to use. So we'll just go back to the default. Now, the connections. It's the big thing, right? Because we're looking after a data environment, so we need to be able to connect to things. So this is where things are a little bit different to Management Studio, that we just need to learn where things are. So we come to our connections and we've got a couple of options. We can create a new connection, create a new server group, or we can show all of our current active connections. Now we can see here I've got a couple of groups, a local, containers, and Azure. So where I mentioned it's about a data platform where we've got instances or access to things across a wide variety of inputs. So we can see here by extending, we've got a local 2019 instance, I've got a SQL Server 2017 instance installed in a container, I've got Docker installed, and from Azure, I've got an Azure SQL database, I've got a PostgreSQL database, and I'm looking after and pulling data from Custo. Because I need to be able to manage and maintain things in Azure, one of the beauties to make your life even easier is with the Azure tab here. If we expand it, you can click the plus and put in your credentials for your subscription. It'll ask you to confirm, you'll have to put in your password and everything. But once you've done that, it'll give you direct access straight from here into your portal. And so by expanding that, you can see there's your subscription details and what are the resources that you've got in place. So you can see here, here's my Azure SQL database. If I right click on that, and this is where it becomes very, very easy for us to do, I can say open in the Azure portal. Click open and it takes me straight to that resource inside of the portal. So I no longer have to worry about logging into the portal, working out which resource group it's in, what resource am I chasing. It'll take me straight there and I can do what I need to do. And I've still only been working inside of Azure Data Studio. If we come back to the tool, another thing which is slightly different to how we manage and maintain things with Management Studio is we have these things called dashboards. Okay, and if I right click on our local, you can see manage, and it'll open up and give us our dashboard. It'll just give us a little bit more real estate, and we can see that there's some default information available to us to be able to see what that instance is all about. We can see our edition, our window, or our operating system version, what the computer name is, etc. The beauty of this, it changes based on the extensions that you've got installed. If you're an administrator, then you're going to want to install the agent extension. We can see here, you might be a data scientist and interested in modeling and predictability, so you want to install the machine learning extension. We've got a SQL assessment extension, which is where you're able to run and run this against your environment to see how your environment is configured. So from those extensions, before we dive a little bit further, how do we get an extension? Well, we come down to our extensions and we'll give ourselves a little bit more real estate. We can see that we've got a number of extensions already installed. I've got 18 and there's quite a number more which are recommended for me to install. Very simple to install. We click on install. Now we've got two ways. We can either download the V6 file, which if you happen to be working in an environment that is heavy on security, you can download that V6 file, hand it off to your security team. They can do their scans, make sure that everything is all good, approve it and place it into a location that everybody has access to that you can then install it. To install it, very simple, we come up here, we say install from V6 and we navigate out to where you've got that V6 file and away you go. You've then got the extension installed. We can continually look for updates based on that monthly release cycle. It'll tell us, but we can come down here and say check for updates and away we go. Coming back, now that we've got those extensions and we know the type of ones that we can use, coming back to our dashboard, and we'll just give ourselves a little bit more real estate. One of the beauties that we've got here, so from an agent point of view, is a new agent job which was made available to us, is notebook jobs. And that's where you can create a notebook, execute that notebook, and the results for that are stored in that notebook, making it very simple for you to be able to see what was run, what are the results, and you might need to make decisions on those and share those with your colleagues. Very simple to do. We can go create new notebook. There are some pre-configurations that you need to be using, but something that's very worthwhile you having a look at to make sure, well, is there something that could benefit us in our environments? Now, I haven't looked at notebooks exactly yet, but we'll have a look at those very shortly, and then you'll see just the beauty of being able to use those and execute them as a agent job to get those results. Speaking of executions, if we were going to run our statements to pull our data sets back, one of the beauties of it, we can execute a statement, and with the result sets, we're able to get those result sets in multiple formats very simply and easily. And so we're able to go save as CSV, Excel, JSON, XML. We can even put them out to a chart. So all depending on the type of statement that you are going to run and how you're going to be using it. So what does that kind of look like? Well, we're working in a notebook. So a notebook, for if you've never heard of them or seen them, a notebook gives you the ability to store text, images, markup, all inside of a single location, as well as code explaining what are we doing. So this first part of the demonstration, we're talking about query executions, what are we doing, and then here's a piece of code to be able to execute that. And so we can see here that I'm connected to or running the SQL Server kernel. I can say change my connection, and where do I want to connect? Well, let's connect to, where's our default? Our default 2019 instance. We'll hit connect, and we can execute that statement. And here's our result set. Not very exciting in a tabular format, but you can see up the top here, here's our different formats that we can put that out to. Taking that even further, if we were to not run this statement in a notebook, and if we were to run this straight as a query, and so we'll go a new query connecting to our 2019, we'll just paste that in. Already connected, we'll use, away we go. Here's our result set, and there's our outputs that we're able to put them through to, and we've got an additional one called Visualizer. We'll have a look at that one in a little bit, specifically when we're working with Custo. But we might want to just put this as a graph. So I can quickly select that graph, and it's gone and created it by default into a bar graph, and we've got a number of options available to us. So we can be very more productive inside of here, creating this output that we might need to give to our management, as opposed to what we would be able to do working inside of Management Studio. Coming back to our notebook, one of the things, if you're like me, and you forget, you're quite busy, but you forget, what was that statement that I actually ran? Well, if you install a query history extension, we can come down here, and as long as you've got it installed, we can see the query history. And you can see here that it'll tell you this is the list of queries that we have run. And by right-clicking on it, you've got a number of options available to you. You can open the existing query, and it'll tell you what was that query. You can run it, etc., making your life a little easier to be able to quickly find what you were using and where you wanted to use it again. Now, it is easy for us to create our notebooks. It's even easier for us to make them in a very presentable way so that we've got lots of options available to us. If we edit this, and we'll just change our view to a split view so that we can then see both our markup and what our rich text looks like. But for us to be able to do things, right, so we can have the likes of Title 1, Title 2, give ourselves, and you can see that it can quickly and easily change. We might want to put let Dave do the work, and we want to call that out, so we want to highlight that, and we can see that's highlighted so that it brings your attention to that. And you might want to include an image for Dave to do that work, and so we add our image, and here's our location that we've prepared earlier. We'll drop it in, And you can see in our markup, there's our image that's been added. We can even take that one step further. And if we'll close that and we'll add a new text cell. And what we're able to do is we can jump out to a URL, for example, and we could come back to the Microsoft site, highlight a few things. We'll come down here. We'll copy that. We'll go back to our notebook, and I'll just paste that straight into our notebook. And you can see that it has taken all of the formatting, all of the images straight into our notebook, making our life so easy that we can create fantastic marked up data that we can share with our colleagues. Now, we did talk about containerization. It's just another environment or platform that we possibly need to support. And so we've got here in this notebook, we've got some commands which we're able to use to see what sort of containers do we have running, are we able to use them? And so we can see, we can list them, we can start our containers, we can stop our containers. And this is where we want to create something where we've got the ability now to do this via the command line, and we don't even have to jump outside of Azure Data Studio. But you can see we get a list of my images, and let's just go to the terminal window, and if we say Docker images, then this will give me a list of the images that I've pre-downloaded. Okay, so we can see I've got 2019, 2017, and I'm able to then create an image. So very quickly, what would we look at doing? If there was a new image that I wanted, we could run a Docker pull command. If I was wanting to create an image, and let's just copy this, paste it into our terminal window, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a 2019 instance. We'll just start that. And what it's doing, we're accepting the EULA, and there we go. We've spun up, before I even got to work through it, we've spun up a 2019 instance. We've accepted the EULA. We've given it a password. Don't worry about my password. You'll never have access to this demo environment. And we've got our port number, our external port from my local machine, 2435, connecting through and mapped to port 1433 internally inside of that Docker container. And we've called it SQL Server 2019_2. And it's using the 2019 latest image that I've previously downloaded. So with that, we could then do a Docker ps-all, and we'll actually get to see there's our 2019 image that was up and running 53 seconds ago. Okay, we can then do what we need to do, and we can say Docker stop 2019_2. We stop that image, and then we want to remove that image. And we've blown away our Docker container. So very quickly, we've been able to spin something up, use it for development purposes, and take it away. One of the other things that we spoke about was Custo. So what is Custo? Well, we can come along here and here's a statement. It looks very similar to T-SQL. Slightly different language and syntax, but what are we doing? Well, we're wanting to know information about storm events that are occurring in the Texas, Washington, or California area, and we're going to summarize those by account. Now, the first thing we do, like we saw before, we're going to connect. We want to choose our Custo connection. Now, Custo is a highly optimized language that allows you to pre-work through high volume data. So for example, you may have your analytics of your portal capturing against your Azure SQL database, and you're wanting to work through all of those captured events to then make decisions. Custom allows you to do that. So with that connection, let's execute this statement. Now we can see that's come back relatively quickly, and it's come back in a tabular format. Not the best format for us to be able to review and analyze and see what this is, especially if we're working with lots of data coming from your data analytics, monitoring your Azure SQL database. So you want to put that into some form of graphical output that makes it easier for you to review, analyze, and share with others. And so with that, we can use the Sanddance or visualizer extension. By clicking on that, it takes that result set and puts it straight into Sanddance, and by default, it's putting it into a columnar output. Now that may be suitable for what you're wanting to achieve and portray, or it may not. And this is the beauty of this extension. It gives you lots of flexibility to play with. So we might change this first off to a scatter graph. Okay, and so we can see that based on what we're doing, it's just the same event count on both the X and Y axis, making it go out high to the right there. And that might not be what we want to do. So let's change the X axis to the actual start time. And so we can see that's now changed, and we can see based on dates, when are our states or times that those particular states, Texas being the worst, that has the most amount of storms. And we can see by far that Texas in around the end of May, it had close to 700 storm events on that one day. Okay, making it so much easier for us to take that information and quickly portray it into a way that we can share with others to visualize it and make the decisions that we need to make. The next thing that we want to have a look at and talk about is from an extensions point of view, as long as you've got it installed, database projects. And so we can come in here and we can say we want to create a new project, and if we do create a new project, then what's it give us? Well, out of the box, we've got two different styles of project that we can create. We can create a database project, or we can create with the core components to create a project publishing out to SQL Edge. Once we've gone and created that particular project, then we're able to store that in source control. And this is another feature that Azure Data Studio over Management Studio out of the box gives us that source control that we're able to then have a look at. And okay, I just need to open up our local source control. It's just gone and opened up or restarted everything. And if we have a look at our source control, then we can see that we've got an existing file which we're looking at wanting to use. If we know the command line codes, then we're able to work inside of Azure Data Studio without even having to step out. And so we can commit to our local repository. We're then able to push to our remote repository, ensuring that all of our colleagues are working off of the same code that we are. And we're able to promote our database projects through into our source control, allowing our colleagues to have access to what we're working on as long as they pull the appropriate branch. One of the things that does make it easier for us, given that we can work with notebooks, and it goes along with what we just spoke about from a source control point of view, is with the creation of those notebooks that we're wanting to share with our colleagues. We create those, put them into source control, and then manage to maintain. But we may have some notebooks that we want to use on a regular basis. And we're able to do that by coming in here to our notebook section. and we've got a number of options available to us. One of which is just really cool for if there's notebooks that we're wanting to use on a regular basis, then we can open that notebook and we can say pin it. And so it will always pin that notebook into this particular location, allowing us to, every time we open up and start working, we've got access to that. And you can see here that I've got Glenn Berry's queries notebook, right, which is allowing me to quickly and easily open this notebook up. If I click on that, I can open up that notebook, and it's got all of the configuration details, or I shouldn't say configuration details, the information that we're wanting to look at on our environment to make sure that it is running fine. Okay, so we've got our version info, we've got our core counts, our server property, etc. Right? That analytical information that we may want to run on a regular basis. But I can pin it, makes my job easier. I don't have to remember where that is. Other things from a notebook's point of view, there's been some notebooks which were provided to us out of the box. So with the installation, we can click on the 2019 guide, and this goes and creates or opens up a whole raft of information. And these are all notebooks that have links allowing us to jump between if we're trying to troubleshoot. You can do a similar sort of thing with your environments in that you can create your notebooks, have them stored in a central repository, have your links between, allowing them to go between. So we click over here and we can see down and say here, troubleshooters, and it has a link off to another notebook, therefore making our lives so much easier. We can have our training materials, or we can have our on-call materials that we're wanting all of our team to be able to use. We can have it all in that single place. Now, the other thing from notebooks' point of view, which I didn't mention just before, was around the difference in language support that is available inside of Azure Data Studio. So if we have a look at Glenn's notebook, and we just give ourselves a little bit more real estate, we can see here that we've got the SQL kernel. Now, as we can see here, there's multiple languages which are all supported. Now, you can't have a notebook with multiple languages in the one notebook, but this is showing that we've got support to be able to create multiple notebooks of different languages. Now, we saw that I ran a custo query before. We could create a custo notebook which has all of our queries that we want to know about, with all of that analytical data against our Azure SQL database. And we want to store that here and have it as a notebook in our pinned location or in our source control environment that our other team members can use. You might be more on that development side of things or data science side of things, and you might be more wanting to work in Python or R. You've got those abilities. But you can also see there we've got PowerShell, right? So we can create all of those, and we're not having to have multiple applications open, therefore being more productive in our work. But to make our lives even easier, because we've got all of those different applications or different languages that are supported, it's very simple for us to know and understand what are the prerequisites and the requirements that we need in place for us to be able to work and utilize those. If we were to change the particular module or kernel, I should say, that we're wanting to utilize, now I won't be able to run anything here because we've written it in T-SQL and it's going through and looking at changing the kernel. And we can see here that we're now running Python. You may have noticed that over to the side here, we've now got some managed packages. If I click on that manage packages, this opens up and it tells us, okay, so what do we already have installed or what do we need to have new? So if we'd never installed Python before, it would come up and it would show us all of these, and instead of uninstalling, we would have to install. But we don't need to know all of these versions that we have to have in place, therefore making our lives easier. We're just able to install those and away we go. So we'll come back to our SQL, therefore we won't break it, and our job done. Now, one of the other things that if you're wanting to just get started with notebooks and convert some of your code that you've already got in place for some of your T-SQL scripts, okay, an easy way that you can look at how do we convert those to notebooks without having to reinvent the wheel. Well, you can have Azure Data Studio open up your T-SQL scripts. And as we can see here, this is a very simple one, which is creating a schema, and we're creating a table that goes with that schema. Now, you can see here, export as notebook. If I click on that export as notebook, that's going and taking my T-SQL code and creating a new notebook that we're then able to save, and it's all done. And we can see we've even got it broken down into our text cell telling us we're going statement 1, this is what we're going to do, and then here's our code cell. Statement 2, our description, and our code cell. Or if you're wanting to, if somebody has given you a notebook and you're wanting to put that back to a T-SQL script, nice and simple, we can say export notebook as SQL, and it puts it back to exactly what we had before. Now, the way that it goes about doing that is that we need to understand and utilize block comments. So you can see here, we've got our first block comment, and then we're saying statement 1, that's our title. So we're doing a little bit of markup into here, but it's our title, and then here's some code that or some text description that we are using. Then here's our code, then here's our block comment again, and we've created our notebook from our T-SQL. Now, the last thing that I want to round out in this demo, and we have covered a lot, but the last thing that we want to round out having a look at is I talked you through and showed you some containerization, okay? And so we had, here's the statement term, and we manually spun up a new Docker image. We've now got this deployment experience available to us inside of Azure Data Studio. By coming to the Connections tab, and we click on the ellipses, and we can say New Deployment. This brings us into the options that are available, and we can see that we've got a number of options available. SQL Server on Windows, Azure SQL Database, container images, virtual machines, edge, big data clusters. Now, I'm not going to go and run one of these and go and create one, but to give you an idea as to what that would look like. Okay, so if we were to say SQL Server container image, we'll select that one. It goes off and it'll ask us what versions do we have. Well, like we saw in the demo earlier, I had 2 images. We're going to go with the 2019 one, same again. Okay, we'll select that. Then what we're able to do is we can just say password 1. It's not a very good password, but hey, this is just a demo. Password 1, what's our port? And it's opened up a notebook for us that, like we saw before, it's got images, it's got markup, and it's got code. Okay, so we're able to have all of those statements that we need to deploy. Here, we can then save it into our common location, and we're then able to use that multiple times moving forward. So with that, let's go back to the slide deck. In summary, what have we covered off in today's session? Well, we started off running through a handful of slides where I introduced you to Azure Data Studio, gave you an overview as to where it's come from, how you can get it, why you want to use it, and what type of scenarios would you be using it with. Then we jumped into the demo and we spent the majority of this afternoon's session in the product tool having a look at rounding out just now with the deployment experience, but we introduced the welcome experience. I showed you the dashboards, which are different to Management Studio. Showed you how the flexibility of using the extensions gives you the ability to pick and choose how you want to use this application. The connectivity, and we were having a look at our local instances, container instances, cloud instances, and not just SQL Server. We had a look at different language supports. I introduced you to notebooks. I showed you how to connect into the Azure portal straight from inside Azure Data Studio for you to be able to manage and maintain your Azure resources. And we spoke about database projects and how you can create those and drop them into source control to share with your colleagues. So with that, I am available for questions, and I'd like to thank you. I hope you had a fantastic summit, and I hope you enjoy my session. Thank you.